Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. Jackie, this is number 91 Fun Chat since we started. Imagine that, visiting with so many guests from around the world whose stories of the 1950s have enlightened us hither and yon, you might say. And of course, this all began because of the interest in our book. So take it away from there.
All righty. Guests, I'd like to have you peruse your screen. On the bottom, you'll see www.whilethewindmillwatch.com. This is a very informative website where you'll find information about the authors and the book, the events that we will be or have been and will be attending, the Fun Chat, and the vendors. So please do look there. And also on your screen, notice in the upper right-hand corner, you see a copy of our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. The beautiful North Dakota sunset wraps around the cover of that book, and you see the two little girls in the front and the windmill, who does have a very important part in the book. He actually speaks. We've personified that windmill. Also, on the bottom right-hand corner, you see a little white dot, and that actually is a very important thing as well, because it indicates that in 2022, this book won the Independent Press Award as the distinguished favorite in the regional category and in the nonfiction area. So we are really pleased to have that. The book was published in 21, and then this came in 22, and now it's 23, and my goodness, there's a movie being made.
Yes.
Janine and I have been privileged to see the first draft, one of many drafts of the movie called While the Windmill Watched. So you'll be hearing more about that a little later. But on with the show. We're going to introduce to you the guest this morning. His name is Chad Wachter. And Chad was born in Bismarck in 1973. Bismarck, North Dakota, that is, where he married his high school sweetheart, Stacy. They have 3 adult children, Derek, Preston, and Kaylee. This well-known business native and entrepreneur is a 5th-generation business owner. He began leaving his mark in the business world after high school by founding Investcorp Incorporated, a real estate company focused on developing and investing in the highest quality residential, multi-family, single-family, and mixed-use projects in North Dakota. So, Chad, welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Well, good. We are too.
Yes.
So to begin with, the criteria for the 1950s Fun Chat is that a guest must have been born in the 1950s or has been greatly influenced by that decade. And this guest lands in the second category, very much influenced by the 1950s. So one of the most iconic visuals in Bismarck, North Dakota, is located on East Main, and it's the Big Boy. The Big Boy is clothed in eye-catching red and white check overalls, which is kind of reminiscent of a casual meal tablecloth, over a clean white shirt. His Elvis-like pompadour hairstyle adorns the top of his head, and he proudly lofts a double cheeseburger with his right arm. So this Big Boy restaurant opened in 1954, so there's the connection.
Yep.
Chad, please share some of the rich history of the Bismarck Big Boy that led to now, and then lead into how you happen to have owned it at the present time.
Well, thinking about the 1950s, I think I've probably got the absolute best reminder of it possible, having the Big Boy. I mean, as you stated, it was opened in 1954, and in July of 1954 by Harley McDowell. And Harley had traveled across the United States, and he had went to a Big Boy and decided that he wanted to open that up in Bismarck. And so he did that. But he didn't tell the Big Boy franchise people that he was going to do that, and kind of got into a little bit of trouble.
I bet. But his whole business plan was different than the Big Boy itself, wasn't it?
Very much so, yeah. So he had pizza burger flying style. He had different types of flavored drinks, all kinds of different things on his menu that the Big Boy corporate people did not have.
Yeah. Yes. And how did that work for him? They said, okay, not a problem, and he just continued with the free spirit that he was, and made that restaurant into what it became to be.
Well, I think they saw the potential that he had, with that location in Bismarck. I mean, it was Bismarck's first drive-through restaurant in the city, and which was actually a pretty new concept back in the time. Interesting enough, Big Boy's drive-through was opened, I believe it was 13 years before McDonald's opened their first drive-through. And Harley was really good friends with Colonel Sanders, and Colonel Sanders used to come up to Bismarck and stay with Harley. And so they worked on a lot of different recipes, chicken recipe, gravy, and a lot of those different items we have on our menu today. They're the same recipes, and that was kind of what he did back in the 50s. Is he incorporated a lot of different items into the menu of the drive-through. And he just loved the Big Boy mascot, and so he kind of developed his own Big Boy.
Had he had experience in the food industry prior to that?
My understanding is he did not. No, so this was his first venture in the food industry.
What a visionary he was!
Yeah.
At that point. And just the fact too that, well, how many places were there that you could order before you got to the window to pick up your food?
Yeah, they're just, back in those days, there just wasn't, and everything was handwritten, and, they would come out and take your order, or they would take the order right at the window. And I can't remember off the top of my head how many people back in the 50s they used to run through the drive-through, but it was pretty quick. In fact, even with all the technology that we have today, I remember comparing about a year ago, he was probably turning just as much or maybe even more people through the drive-through quicker than we can today.
Is that right? Huh.
Yeah.
Well, for this little girl, born in 1950, and going through the kind of the metamorphosis of the start of the Big Boy, what I remember mostly was when we drove in on US Highway 10 from Minokan, and we passed, coming in through the east end of Bismarck, and we passed this long line of cars parked on the south side of Main Street. That was quite eye-opening, even for this little girl, that all those people are willing to wait that long to go to the Big Boy. Do you remember how were you ever told how long those lines were, Chad?
I know that the line sometimes would go back to probably about 3 blocks at times on the main avenue. In fact, it's interesting because sometimes our line will back up onto Main Avenue, and people every once in a while will get upset and call the police and say, hey, Big Boy's line is backed up on Main Avenue blocking traffic. And the Bismarck Police Department's like, well, that's Big Boy, that's kind of, it's been like that for 60 some years, so that's to be expected. But, for our 60th anniversary, we had 60-cent pizza burgers. And
flying style.
Yes. Yep. And we actually had the line backed all the way up to let's see, it would have been 9th Street,
Nice.
and
Okay.
which is the one way going north. I mean, it probably was 20 blocks. I mean, we had the police department was out there. They had directing traffic, and we gave them a little bit of a notice, but that was a real fun event to have.
Did anyone bring their classic cars from the 50s and drive?
Oh, yes.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, the car was full of them, and we had 50s music played in the back in our little island that we have, where we have a little park where people can eat outside during the summertime, and it was fun.
Well, we talk about this pizza burger flying style. Some of our viewers might not know what that means. Can you tell us?
Yeah, tell us.
Well, if you come to Bismarck, North Dakota, you have to have a pizza burger flying style with
exactly
fries. So pizza burger flying style is it's basically it's a hamburger with cheese, pizza sauce, and it is put in 2 pieces of bread, and then the bread is put through a press, and the edges are all sealed, and it's a sandwich, a pizza burger sandwich, and so. Interesting about this pizza burger flying style we have back in the 50s and 60s, and they would call them flying saucers, and they were actually round. The presses were round, and they would cut off the edges, and then as time went by, they became square, and then we left the edges on because we found that people wanted to tear the edges off. They would dunk them into our gravy that we have, our chicken gravy, or they would throw them outside their window so that the birds could eat.
Oh,
okay.
Well,
so do you also still have Green Rivers?
We don't. No.
Oh, you don't. Oh, no. That was my thing.
But you've got. Oh, go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, we do like to bring back periodically different things that have been taken off the menu. I know that we're kind of doing a survey right now to kind of try to find out what some of those items all are. And we've been pretty fortunate. Our manager that we have, our general manager has been there for he's been there for over 35 years.
Wow. What changes he has seen.
So he's got a lot of knowledge and a lot of that history. So.
And he has to have been influential in helping you in as owner of the business and understand how it works. And
absolutely. Yeah. So, his name is Don, and, when everybody in Bismarck, I think, thinks of Big Boy, I think they really think of Don. I mean, he's a staple. He's been there forever. And he really is, when I think of Big Boy Bismarck, I really think of our general manager, Don, because he's very passionate about the Big Boy. He knows the history of it. He knows how important it is to the community. So, when he goes to work every day, he strives to make sure that we do the best job that we can. And the thing about the Big Boy is we're a generational restaurant, right?
Yes.
So, my parents took me, my grandparents took me, my parents took them, I take my kids. So it's a really fun place.
What is your favorite item on the menu, Chad?
Well, I like a double pizza burger flying style. So 2 patties. But so before I owned it, I would come through the drive-through, and we also have what's called a Big Boy Original. Okay. So the Big Boy Original is kind of like a Big Mac from McDonald's. In fact, the Big Boy McDonald's, we believe, most everybody in the Big Boy organization believes that McDonald's actually copied the Big Boy Original, and that's where they got the idea for the Big Mac. But so when I bought before I bought Big Boy, I always wanted to try a Big Boy Original flying style, and they always told me that they couldn't do it. That they weren't allowed to do it, and they couldn't do it. So I'm going to tell you, the first thing I did when I bought the Big Boy is I had a Big Boy Original flying style. It was so good that I made sure we added it to our menu. So.
Good for you. We'll have to try that when we get there, Janine.
Yes, I know. I'm excited. We're going to be in North Dakota this fall on a book tour and in Bismarck, and so we will definitely be going through that drive-through. Okay, and we just touched on the Green River, but I think you have some other unusual drinks for your patrons. And what would some of those be?
Yeah, so we have, probably the favorite drink that we have is we have a Hottentot, which is it's a cinnamon. It's basically we take cinnamon extract that we
Okay.
get. We actually get it from a European company. We're the only vendor that they actually make this syrup for, and
Really?
we have an exclusive agreement to where they can't sell to anybody. In fact, they tried to discontinue it 3 years ago, and we had to negotiate to make sure that we were able to that they wouldn't discontinue it on us. So
Mhm.
we ship it in, and then we mix it. We take it because it's very concentrated. So we have to mix it to get it to where we can mix it with drinks. But that's kind of our number one drink. It's cinnamon that's mixed with Sprite, Coke, Diet Coke, and then we've got the brown cow, which is basically kind of like a root beer float, root beer and ice cream, and that's another very popular drink that we have. And so yeah, it's interesting. So back in the 50s and the 60s, and I don't know what they all were, but Stan Rothenberger, who I purchased the Big Boy from, and he bought it from Harley McDowell, but he told me that back in the 50s and 60s, they actually had 27 different flavored drinks.
Wow.
Oh, is that right?
Something for everybody.
Yeah, but that was kind of the thing back in the 50s is you go to the soda pop places, and then you would order your drink, and then they would mix different flavors in with it. I'm told. So
Well, so have you excuse me, you want to finish your I was going to ask if you had extended this to coffee drinks. Do you play with those?
We haven't. That might be something that we could try.
Right.
Yeah.
And I won't charge any percentage for you.
And we'll be your taste testers when we come.
Yeah.
All right.
How about that?
That'll be good.
Is there something else that on your menu where you're dunking into the gravy? What else? No?
Yeah. So I mean, French fries. We have our shoestring French fries that people love to dunk into gravy or chicken, and we have a very specific spec of French fry that we get, and so we want them to be a certain length, and we don't want them to be too thick, because one of the things that's important to us is when you come through Big Boy today, we want it to taste exactly the same as it did back in the 1950s. So we always stay very close to the specs that we have. But yeah, you can dunk chicken nuggets, chicken French fries, burgers, pizza burger flying style. The gravy I've never had gravy better than our gravy, and I'm not just saying that. I'm being very.
Yeah.
I felt that before I even bought the Big Boy, but it's homemade every day, and it's just wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always have felt somewhat of a connection to the Big Boy because in those days of the 50s, and could have been in the 60s also, that our babysitter from Anoka worked there. I think she was at the window quite a bit.
But she was one of the managers when she was in high school even. She's a really sharp gal. And yeah, well, we can talk to you about that a little bit later.
Well, she's still alive if you want to bring her back. Too.
Yeah.
Yeah. He can help us bring back some of those items and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, we'll talk later.
Yes. Well, this has been really fun to learn about the Big Boy. It's it's so iconic, and it's wonderful that it is still in operation. And have you seen a huge increase in population coming to the Big Boy, especially since you're the only Big Boy in the state anymore?
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of new faces. I mean, Big Boy has a lot of repeat customers, but now we're seeing that, the next generation coming through, and so their line is always long, and yeah, the Big Boy's business it's been great, and during COVID it was almost out of control because nobody could go to sit down restaurants, so the drive-throughs were just crazy.
Huh. So then moving on from this wonderful venture, then you grew up in a very entrepreneur family. So how did your family's um, how did your family impact your life then, from day one there?
Yeah, so yeah, my family came to Bismarck back in, the 1880s. And my family's always been self-employed, always been very entrepreneurial, and lots of different businesses. Growing up in my family, I worked for a lot of the different businesses that my parents owned and my family owned. And so yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because I don't really know any other way other than the entrepreneurial way.
Right. So have any of your three children decided they might want to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, so my three kids, two out of my three kids, my oldest son Derek has a degree from the University of North Dakota in, guess what, entrepreneurship.
All right. You could probably have taught the class.
My daughter is there now getting her degree in entrepreneurship. And then my other son is strayed a little bit away. He's at the University of Minnesota, but I mean, we still love him. No.
That's good. That's good.
So what is he focusing on?
Well, he's more on the business management side.
So. Oh, well, that's still business.
Yes. That's good because we need managers to help manage the entrepreneurial stuff.
Yes, right. Well, what a team.
Yeah.
Do you find that your method of managing a business differs from that of your father or your grandfather?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Just thinking about the way that I grew up and learned how to run businesses and the way that I actually do it today are totally different. I mean, you have to treat people differently today than you did back, when I was younger. In the 80s, you could get pretty tough with your employees, and it's different. It's a whole different environment that we're in today. So
expand on that more. First of all, basically, you need to treat people well. Kindness needs to be the main theme. So what's different then?
Well, I mean, what's different is, I mean, when you, it's a great question. So, back in my day, when you say that you did something wrong, you would, maybe get yelled at and you would learn not to make that mistake again. Today you have to use a different method of teaching people and working through those things. You have to be. The way that I like to run my businesses is I first of all, I like to pretend that my business is a sports team and I'm the coach. Okay.
Okay.
And my employees, they're my players, right? They're playing for my team. And if they do something wrong, I need to call them in and I need to explain to them how to do it better, kind of coach them and teach them.
Yes.
And that's kind of the method that I use. That's maybe a little, it's probably the same, but more, but a little bit different because you can't be tough with your employees. You have to be more of a mentor to your employees.
Yes. Well, that makes sense. So what kind of training do your employees have before they are totally employed?
Well, I'm involved in a lot of different businesses. So like, for an example, the food industry, we want our employees to understand food safety. We want them to understand, proper cooking temperatures, the importance of washing your hands, not touching your cell phone when you are, handling food. When you handle food. The other thing I want to say about the big boys, for the last 4 out of the 6 years that I've owned it, we have had a perfect health inspection score.
Good for you.
That's important.
So we use gloves when we're handling food. We do not allow a cashier who is handling money to touch food. Just things like that.
Things like that, yeah. Just being more aware of things.
I'm curious to know, Chad, and you talked about how you mentor your employees. Is that a concept that you used in raising your family also?
Yeah. So I believe in natural consequences as long as they don't hurt people. So sometimes I will see an employee or I'll see my own children doing something that I know is just not going to work. Okay. But I will let them make that mistake because I want them to learn from it, and be there to help them through it. And I will say that's one thing I got to give a lot of credit to my parents. That was the way that they taught me is, sometimes I wouldn't agree with them, and they would just let me go ahead and do it anyways. And then I would learn, the reason why I should have listened to them.
Yeah.
That reminds me of our mother. She said one time, the hardest thing you have to do as a parent is to watch your children make mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, tell us more about your parents, because they would have been living in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
Or even your grandparents, or how, there's a whole nother part of this story of you and in Bismarck and of your family that we would like to learn about. And that has to do with that Missouri River that used to flood like crazy. And can you tell us about that and how that affected your family?
Yeah. So my mom born in 1951, dad born in 1952. I always remember the year my dad was born, because that was the year that South Bismarck, that the dam was completed and South Bismarck was no longer supposed to flood.
Mm-hmm.
So my family back in the day had learned about, these different dams that were going to be built. And in fact, our family is still to this day and back then involved in the construction industry. So, but back then we were involved in earth moving. So we actually bid on a lot of these different dams that were going to be constructed, the dirt work part of it, and the Garrison Dam being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so my family, knowing that, that South Bismarck wasn't going to flood anymore, bought as much land as they possibly could south of the tracks, south of Main Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, and started to develop it. My grandfather, Paul Wachter, built Kirkwood Mall down there, built and owned Kirkwood Mall. And then we donated land to the city of Bismarck for the event center that they have today. And then we developed a lot of the residential down there and worked with the school district to put schools. And we found back in the day that a lot of banks were somewhat hesitant to finance projects in South Bismarck. So then we started our own bank to handle those.
Still there.
It's still there. Yes. Yes. Well, we don't own it anymore, but yeah, that bank did a lot of good, and it still does to this day. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I remember, of course, and we talked about this previous to recording, was those beautiful golden yellow barns down on what was known as the Wachter Ranch, and that was just the south side of Bismarck. And at that time, to what I recall, Bowen Avenue was way south in there. I don't think there was much development done on Bowen Avenue then. But tell us about the Wachter Ranch. What you can.
Yeah. So yeah, we ran a couple thousand head of cattle down below the hill there, below the tracks, and there were 4 different barns down there, and so we ran our cattle there, and then it would be in the then throughout the years, throughout the 50s and the 60s, we were acquiring land in Morton County, north of Mandan. And actually, at one point in time, we owned 28,800 acres. That was how big our ranch was.
Okay.
The interesting thing about this ranch that we had is that it was 28,800 contiguous acres. It was all contiguous.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So we eventually, in the late 60s, early 70s, moved all our cattle. Well, it would have been in the middle of the 60s. We moved our cattle from our South Bismarck location to north of Mandan onto our ranch up there.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that still in operation? A ranch up there?
Yeah. So, back in the 80s, the 1980s, my family, family businesses can be difficult, and we had a lot of different generations involved in our family. And so we kind of decided to kind of, instead of everybody owning the piece of one pie, we kind of divided that pie up. And so my side of the family ended up getting out of that ranching and farming business. We were more involved in like construction and real estate development. And the other side of my family was more involved in the ranching business. But, a good portion of that ranch is still around today. Some of it's been sold off.
Okay.
And do you have siblings as part of your family?
I am an only child.
No kidding. Okay.
Yes.
That's a big responsibility, being an only child.
Yeah, so I got spoiled a lot, younger, I didn't have to, didn't have anybody to compete with, but, now that my parents are getting a little bit older, I've got to handle that too. So
Yeah.
ups and downs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us back on this, with your ranch, were any of those acres cropped, or is it all pasture?
No, there was a combination of crop and pasture. Yep. So
Okay.
we did some farming and
And were teams of horses primarily used in those early days then for farming?
oh yes, yep. They used teams of horses, and and we were had a lot of different horses back then. In fact, we had built a show. Trying to think of what the term
Arena?
was. Arena, yeah, north of Mandan.
Okay.
And we were very much into the show horses and stuff like that.
Oh my.
In the 70s.
Uh-huh. Do your children, have they ever had the experience of horseback riding or showing?
They really haven't. The only time they've gotten to horseback ride is like up at camp up at Lake Sakakawea or out in Medora. We'll go to Medora every year, go horseback riding.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Do you find that once you get on that horse again for a long time that you get sore after a while when you get off?
Yes.
It's the knees.
It is. Yep.
Yes. Well, it's such an interesting story about the development of Bismarck and that land that was south of the tracks and probably the developers of the railroad came in and well, okay, that makes me curious to understand that so much of the homestead land that was available was owned by the railroad. So was the land that your family purchased originally homesteaded property south of the tracks?
The Wachter family, to my knowledge, never homesteaded.
Okay.
Yeah, I know my mom's family did. The Felkley family up in the Goodrich Denhoff area, they did, but
Felkley?
yeah.
Oh, our dad was from Goodrich, and
really?
I remember him talking about the Felkleys. Do you remember
Yes.
that?
Yes, I do.
We have to compare notes when we're done recording, Chad.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
you mentioned that the original Wachters came to North Dakota in the 1800s. So from where did they come?
They came from
And why?
Yeah, Grumbach, Germany. They came to the United States. Probably, like the reason a lot of people came to the U.S. is they wanted better opportunities. So,
and they found it.
yeah, and so when we like a winter that we had last year, I asked myself why they picked North Dakota, but
Exactly.
Yes, that's right. I think we learned when we lived up there that, and in generations ahead of us too, you have to be strong of character in order to battle the Great Plains. And you are right. This year, it's been proven time and time again that weather is something to contend with.
Go ahead.
Yes, just interestingly enough, I remember my grandparents telling me that in order to come to the United States for many, I don't know when it changed, but you had to have a sponsor to come to the United States. A sponsor. So I'm not sure who, I know that my grandparents, my great grandparents sponsored people to come over, but I don't know if they were ever our family was sponsored or how that worked back then. So.
Well, maybe just even the fact that going to a German community that you were easily sponsored, and at least in your mother's side, of course, Goodrich was quite a German community.
Yes,
up there. Yeah. Jackie, anything else that we can glean from this gentleman in our conversation?
Oh, probably there is so much more, but I know the clock is ticking.
Yes. And viewers, we are so thankful that you are joining us today to learn more about the history of Bismarck, that big boy drive-in, the development of the dams on Missouri River to help really with the growth of Bismarck, North Dakota, and among other areas in that state, and families who had the desire and the entrepreneurship, such as the Wachter family, to really invest in those opportunities. So Chad Wachter, we thank you so much for your time today. This has been wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome.
We're grateful.
Yep. Jackie, how can you close the program?
Well, I would like to have our viewers again look at their screen, and below you'll see a blue thumbs up button. So we'd really appreciate it if you would click that, as well as the red subscribe button. We also appreciate that. And do check out the website, which is down below. And Janine, do you want to say one more thing about the movie?
Oh, I do. Yes, we are excited that that our movie, While the Windmill Watched, I call it our movie, but it's a movie for North Dakota, and it's a movie for the Great Plains that's being produced by Canticle Productions in Bismarck. Mr. Daniel Belinsky is the producer, and let me tell you, he's had some bell ringers of movies that tell the history of our wonderful state of North Dakota. So that's upcoming, where we will keep you updated. We have seen the first draft of the script, as what Jackie had mentioned, and there's so much more to come, so much more to come. And it's interesting from the Pfeiffer sisters' viewpoint to be involved in the production of the movie. So that's what's upcoming, and we don't know if it'll be 2023, 2024, but it's coming soon, right, Jackie?
Yes, whatever soon is.
All right.
So in the meantime, tell your friends, even your relatives, about the 1950s Fun Chat. Until next time, bye-bye.